A soft wind brushed against the silent rows of gravestones, as if nature itself mourned the loss of Dr. Ethan Miles. He wasn't just another man buried beneath the earth. He was a name whispered in the halls of science, a visionary who spent his life chasing answers to questions others were too afraid to ask. His sudden death during an experiment sent shockwaves through his colleagues, leaving behind not just grief, but also unfinished work that demanded attention. Ethan's team, led by his close friend and collaborator Dr. Nathan Cole, stood at the edge of his freshly dug grave. Nathan's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the small black camera that would soon rest inside the coffin. It wasn't an ordinary camera. It was equipped with advanced sensors capable of detecting even the faintest motion, sound, and temperature fluctuations. This wasn't just an act of curiosity. It was a continuation of Ethan's life's work, a way to honor his belief that energy in all its forms never truly ceased to exist. The family had reluctantly agreed to the experiment. Ethan's sister, Lila, had hesitated at first, but eventually gave her blessing, knowing how much her brother believed in pushing the boundaries of understanding. "If anyone would have wanted this, it's Ethan," she said softly, watching as the camera was carefully placed inside the coffin. The lid was closed, and the sound of dirt being shoveled over it marked the beginning of a journey none of them were prepared for. Back in the lab, the team gathered around a screen displaying the live feed from the camera. The image was clear, showing Ethan lying peacefully in the coffin, his hands folded over his chest. For the first few hours, there was nothing but stillness. The faint hum of the equipment was the only sound in the room, accompanied by the occasional nervous cough from one of the researchers. Yet, despite the calm, there was an unspoken tension among them, as if they all expected something to happen. And though they wouldn't admit it aloud, each one of them felt the weight of an unshakable question. What if Ethan had been right all along? The night stretched on, quiet and uneventful, but no one left their seats. The idea of leaving was unthinkable. Even Nathan, who had always prided himself on his logic, found his thoughts drifting to the unknown. Science had always been his compass, yet as he stared at the lifeless image on the screen, he couldn't ignore the feeling that they were about to witness something far beyond its grasp. The second night came faster than any of them expected. The lab, usually bustling with noise, was eerily silent as the team resumed their watch over the feed. Ethan's image remained unchanged, his serene expression a stark contrast to the growing tension in the room. Nathan sipped his cold coffee, his eyes locked on the monitor. He couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be different. It started as a faint vibration. The motion detector's subtle beep caught everyone's attention. "Soil settling?" one of the assistants muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Nathan leaned forward, his heart beating faster. The vibration wasn't constant. It came in irregular bursts, like a pattern trying to form. The camera, positioned to capture every inch of the coffin, recorded the barely perceptible shudder of the lid. No one spoke, but the air in the room felt heavier. Then the sound began. It was faint at first, almost like static, but it grew clearer. A rhythmic, almost mechanical pulse echoed faintly from the speakers. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Nathan turned the volume up slightly, and what they heard sent chills down their spines. It wasn't just random noise, it sounded like a heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, and utterly impossible. "Check the readings," Nathan ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. The sound technician scrambled to analyze the data, but nothing made sense. There was no logical explanation for what they were hearing. Ethan's body was still, lifeless as expected, yet the heartbeat persisted, faint but undeniable. This could be equipment interference, one of the researchers offered weakly, but no one seemed convinced. The sound technician shook his head. "The signal's clean. There's no interference." The pulse continued for another few minutes before fading into silence. The team sat frozen, their minds racing to piece together what they had just witnessed. Nathan's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, his thoughts a chaotic mix of excitement and dread. The implications of what they had just recorded were staggering. If this was real, if energy could persist in ways they didn't understand, it would change everything they thought they knew about life and death. As the lab fell back into uneasy quiet, Nathan glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Something told him that the night wasn't over. Something told him that Ethan wasn't done. The third night brought with it an air of anticipation that none of them could ignore. The team gathered earlier than usual, their conversations hushed and careful, as though speaking too loudly might disturb whatever force was at play. Nathan hadn't slept. His mind replayed the faint heartbeat from the night before over and over again, each repetition drawing him further into the mystery. He wasn't alone. Every member of the team carried that same mix of fear and fascination. As the feed stabilized on the monitor, Ethan's still image appeared once again. For the first hour, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The tension in the room was palpable, each passing second stretching their patience thinner. Nathan scanned the motion detector, which remained steady, and glanced at the audio feed. Silence. Perhaps the anomalies were a fluke, he thought. Perhaps they had let their imaginations get the better of them. But then the light appeared. It started as a faint flicker, almost imperceptible at first, emanating from Ethan's chest. One of the researchers gasped softly, drawing everyone's eyes to the screen. The flicker grew stronger, more defined, a soft, pulsing glow that seemed to throb in rhythm with the heartbeat they had heard the night before. Nathan leaned in, his breath catching. It wasn't just light. It had a pattern, a deliberate cadence that seemed almost alive. "Infrared," Nathan said, his voice cutting through the silence. The technician toggled the feed to display the infrared view, and what they saw made the room go completely still. The light wasn't random. It was concentrated directly over Ethan's heart, forming what looked like faint, intricate lines radiating outward like a web of energy. The glow intensified momentarily before subsiding, only to return in sharp, distinct pulses. "Is it residual energy?" one of the scientists asked, her voice shaking. Nathan shook his head, unable to tear his eyes away. Residual energy wouldn't behave like this. It wouldn't organize itself. The glow continued for several minutes, each pulse more deliberate than the last. As it faded again, the motion detector beeped softly. All eyes shifted back to the main feed. Ethan's left hand, which had been resting peacefully on his chest since the burial, shifted. Not a spasm, not a twitch, but a slow, deliberate movement as though trying to reach for something unseen. No one spoke. The room felt frozen in time, every eye locked on the screen. The hand settled back into place, and for a moment everything was still. But the motion had been unmistakable. It defied logic, yet there it was, recorded in perfect clarity. Nathan's mind raced, trying to rationalize what they were witnessing, but the evidence was undeniable. Something was happening inside that coffin, something no one could explain. His heart pounded as he realized this was no longer just an experiment. This was the beginning of a revelation, one that could shatter the boundaries of science and the mysteries of life itself. The fourth night arrived, and the weight of what they had witnessed hung heavy over the lab. By now, the story had started to trickle out. A junior researcher, unable to contain her excitement, had shared vague details with a colleague outside the team. Within hours, whispers of the experiment spread across academic circles, fueling speculation. Journalists began sniffing around, desperate for answers. Nathan had no choice but to tighten security, ensuring no further leaks until they could fully comprehend what they were uncovering. As the team resumed their vigil, the mood was different. There was no idle chatter, no speculating about mundane anomalies. Every pair of eyes was glued to the monitor, bracing for the next inexplicable event. The air in the room felt electric, charged with equal parts dread and anticipation. The first sign came earlier than expected. Barely 30 minutes into the feed, a soft, rhythmic tapping echoed from the speakers. It was faint, like the gentle knock of fingertips against wood. Nathan's pulse quickened as he turned up the audio. The tapping grew louder, more distinct, and it was coming from inside the coffin. The sound wasn't frantic, it was measured, deliberate, almost as if someone were trying to communicate. "Is it a code?" one of the researchers whispered. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he listened closely. The tapping paused, then resumed, each sequence spaced perfectly apart. It wasn't random. It was structured. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the pattern was unmistakably Morse code. "Decipher it," he said quickly, his voice tight with urgency. The technician scrambled to jot down the taps and pauses, her hands trembling slightly as she translated the sequence. Within moments, she froze, her pen hovering over the paper. "What does it say?" Nathan pressed. The room went silent as she read the message aloud. "Not gone. Watching. Energy lives." The words sent a wave of unease through the team. They were simple yet profound, carrying a weight that defied explanation. Who, or what, was sending this message? And how? Nathan's mind churned with possibilities, none of which felt comforting. The very foundation of his understanding was being shaken, brick by brick, as this experiment unraveled truths he wasn't prepared to face. The glow returned, brighter this time, pulsing in tandem with the message as though confirming its authenticity. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the tapping ceased, and the light dimmed. The screen went still once more, leaving only the faint sound of their collective breathing in the room. Nathan leaned back, his thoughts racing. The implications were staggering. If energy persisted beyond death in this way, what did it mean for their understanding of consciousness, of existence itself? The team exchanged uneasy glances, each of them grappling with the same question. Was this Ethan's voice reaching out from beyond, or something else entirely? For the first time, Nathan wasn't sure if he wanted to know the answer, but deep down he also knew there was no turning back now. They had crossed a line, and whatever awaited them on the other side would change everything. By the fifth night, the tension had reached a breaking point. The lab was no longer just a place of observation. It felt like the epicenter of something much larger. News of the experiment had leaked further despite Nathan's precautions, and speculation was running wild. Online forums buzzed with theories, ranging from groundbreaking scientific phenomena to spiritual awakenings. Some dismissed it as a hoax, while others clung to it as proof of an afterlife. The pressure on Nathan and his team was mounting, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. The live feed began like the nights before. Ethan's body, perfectly still, framed by the dim light of the camera. The motion sensors remained quiet, the audio feed devoid of the faint tapping they'd heard the previous night. For the first hour, the team watched in anxious silence, the stillness gnawing at their nerves. Then, without warning, the screen flickered. "Is it a glitch?" one of the technicians asked, her voice betraying her unease. Nathan shook his head, his eyes fixed on the monitor. The flicker stabilized, revealing a faint shimmer around Ethan's body. It wasn't just light, it was something more, an ethereal glow that seemed to ripple like waves on water. The room fell silent as the shimmer grew stronger, its movement deliberate and purposeful, as though it were alive. The temperature sensors beeped in unison, alerting the team to a sudden rise in heat within the coffin. It was subtle at first, but quickly escalated, the readings climbing far beyond anything they had recorded before. The shimmer intensified, its glow shifting into distinct shapes, patterns that seemed to swirl and converge before their eyes. "What is that?" a researcher whispered, leaning closer to the screen. Nathan's heart raced as he recognized the patterns. They weren't random. They resembled the fractal designs Ethan had often sketched in his notebooks, diagrams he believed represented the flow of energy in living organisms. As they watched, the patterns began to take on a more coherent form. Letters emerged, faint but unmistakable, forming a single word. Energy. The word hovered for a moment, then dissolved into a cascade of light that spread across the screen. The room filled with a soft hum, a sound that resonated deeply, as though it were coming not just from the speakers but from the very air around them. Suddenly, the motion detector beeped. The team turned back to the monitor just in time to see Ethan's hand move again. This time it wasn't a subtle shift, it rose slowly, deliberately, and hovered above his chest. The glow enveloped his hand, and for a moment it seemed as though he were reaching for something beyond the coffin walls. Then, just as suddenly, his hand lowered and the glow faded entirely. The screen went dark for a split second before returning to its usual stillness. The hum dissipated, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The team sat frozen, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Nathan's voice broke the silence, steady but filled with awe. "He's trying to tell us something. This isn't random. This is communication." The team exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever was happening in that coffin, it wasn't just residual energy. It was deliberate, intelligent, and beyond anything they had ever encountered. Nathan knew they were on the edge of a discovery that could redefine humanity's understanding of life and death, but the question lingered. Were they prepared for what that discovery might reveal? The sixth night arrived with an air of both anticipation and dread. By now, the lab was no longer just a place of research. It felt like a battleground between the known and the unknown. The team sat at their stations, their faces etched with a mixture of fatigue and fascination. They had crossed the threshold of science and entered a realm where answers only led to more questions. The feed began as expected, Ethan's body, illuminated by the faint glow of the camera. For the first hour, nothing happened, but no one dared to look away. Then, at precisely midnight, the shimmer returned, this time more vivid than before. The glow didn't ripple aimlessly. It moved with purpose, tracing lines in the air around Ethan's body. The team watched in stunned silence as the patterns coalesced into something unmistakable, a human form, translucent and faint, hovering above the coffin. The figure wasn't fully formed, more like an outline of light, but it radiated an energy that was almost palpable. Nathan leaned forward, his breath caught in his throat. "Is that him?" someone whispered, though the question hung in the air unanswered. The figure didn't move, but seemed to pulse gently, as though breathing. It lingered for a moment before fading, leaving behind a faint trail of light that danced along the edges of the coffin. Before anyone could speak, the audio feed crackled to life. A voice emerged, faint but clear enough to send chills down their spines. "Not bound, energy flows, beyond." The voice was unmistakably Ethan's, though it carried an otherworldly quality, as if filtered through something vast and incomprehensible. The team sat frozen, their minds struggling to grasp what they were hearing. Nathan, however, felt a surge of determination. "Record every word," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his thoughts. The technician nodded, her fingers trembling as she transcribed the message. The voice faded, replaced by a low hum that resonated deeply, as though vibrating through the walls of the lab. Then, the screen flickered again, and for the briefest moment the feed changed. It no longer showed the inside of the coffin, but instead a vast expanse of light, infinite and ethereal. Shapes moved within the light, indistinct and ever-shifting, as though glimpsed through a veil. The vision lasted only seconds before the feed returned to the coffin, now bathed in stillness. The hum ceased, leaving an almost oppressive silence in its place. The team exchanged looks, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. They knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied the boundaries of both science and belief. Nathan's voice broke the silence. "This is no longer just an experiment. This is a message, a bridge between what we know and what we can't yet comprehend." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. The team nodded, each of them acutely aware that they were part of something that would change humanity forever. As they packed up for the night, Nathan couldn't shake the image of the light-filled expanse. What had they glimpsed? A glimpse of the afterlife? A higher plane of existence? Whatever it was, one thing was clear. Ethan's work wasn't over. It had only just begun. The seventh night arrived like the calm before a storm. The team gathered with a mixture of trepidation and resolve, fully aware that this would likely be the final night of the experiment. The world outside had become a frenzy of speculation, with leaked snippets of their findings sparking debates across social media, news outlets, and academic forums. Inside the lab, however, a profound silence hung in the air, as they prepared to witness the conclusion of Ethan's story. As the feed came to life, the coffin appeared as still and unremarkable as it had the nights before. Yet an unspoken tension gripped the team, each of them bracing for the unknown. Nathan sat at the center of the group, his eyes fixed on the monitor. This wasn't just science anymore, it was personal. Whatever happened tonight would either cement Ethan's legacy or plunge them deeper into questions they might never answer. At exactly midnight, the glow returned, more intense than ever before. It began at Ethan's chest, spreading outward in a series of intricate patterns that seemed almost mathematical. The glow enveloped the entire coffin, radiating a warmth that was visible even through the screen. Motion detectors beeped wildly as Ethan's hand moved once again, this time rising completely off his chest. The team watched in stunned silence as the hand hovered, steady and deliberate, before slowly tracing a shape in the air. The audio feed crackled and Ethan's voice emerged once more, clearer and more resonant than before. Energy, transforms, never ends. The words echoed in the lab, sending shivers through everyone present. Then something extraordinary happened. The glow intensified, and for the first time the patterns formed a coherent image, a message written in light. "Thank you." The two words floated above Ethan's chest, shimmering with an otherworldly brilliance. The room was silent, every eye locked on the screen. The message lingered for a few moments before the glow began to fade, retreating back into Ethan's body. The motion detectors fell silent, and the temperature reading stabilized. The coffin returned to stillness as if nothing had ever happened. For several minutes, no one spoke. The team sat frozen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "He knew," he said softly, his voice filled with both awe and sorrow. "He knew we would do this. He trusted us to finish what he started." The words struck a chord with everyone in the room. Ethan's experiment had been more than just science, it had been a leap of faith, a belief that understanding the mysteries of energy and existence could bring humanity closer to the truth. As the team shut down the equipment for the final time, Nathan saved the recordings, ensuring they would be preserved for future study. He looked at the screen one last time, the image of Ethan's still form now etched permanently in his memory. Whatever they had witnessed, it had changed them all. It wasn't just about proving a theory or pushing the boundaries of science. It was about connection between life and death, energy and consciousness, the known and the unknown. The experiment was over, but the journey it had begun was only just starting. As the team left the lab that night, the world outside buzzed with questions, but Nathan felt a quiet peace. Ethan's message was clear. Energy transforms, but it never ends. And somewhere, in ways they couldn't yet understand, Ethan Miles still existed.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.